morning, and thanks for joining us today here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the father-son team behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can find out more about Ralph, Tim, the entire team at Welcome Home Financial Partners on the website. That is welcomehomefp.com. Find out more about them, set up a time to speak with them. You can also give a call right now, 804-635-3550, if you have questions about your retirement. If you want to know what so many people out there want to know, am I going to be okay in retirement? Well, it's not a simple black and white yes or no question. It does take a little bit of exploration, but it does pertain to your particular circumstances. And that all begins with, again, setting up a time, 804-635-3550. My name is Chris Swan, and I'm pleased to be joined, as always, by Ralph and Tim Short. Gentlemen, glad to be with you as always. How you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing well.
Doing very well, thanks. You know, Father's Day is right around the corner, and I know all fathers here, and there's a lot of power. I've said this before. My son asks so many questions. There's power in saying, I don't know these days, but it's always followed up with, but let's find the answer together. Let's find out the answer. And so you may hear things that we talk about today when it comes to your retirement, and you may say, I don't know. I don't know the answer for that. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, find out the answer, set up a time, speak with the team like Welcome Home Financial Partners, and put a little clarity towards your retirement. So the number one question people have is, am I going to be okay? The number one concern they have is running out of money. It kind of goes hand in hand. Retirees and pre-retirees' top worries include inflation and unexpected medical costs. But there's a new JP Morgan survey that of 5 million retirees that said those fears, quite frankly, are overblown. So, gentlemen, does this suggest that maybe we don't need as much savings to retire comfortably? Is building a retirement plan on general just assumptions, is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, I think it's important for most people to assess where they currently are. I know inflation's been talked about so much in the last few years because of COVID and this, that, and the other. Now, the tariff conversation as well. But, you know, I think there's a lot of things that you got to pay attention to, and inflation's not the scariest thing out there. There's so many things that will come into play. The unexpected medical cost is a big one because they're unexpected, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't know what that looks like or when it's going to hit. But everybody's got a different situation, a different scenario, or in different wants and needs for retirement. And I think it's really important to assess where you're at and not just hear the buzzwords or whatever of, you know, talking heads on TV or whatnot. And, you know, you might not need quite as much money to live on. I know there's a few studies out there, anywhere between $1 million to $2 million is what you need. Well, you know, some people can survive off $500,000, right? It's all about your spending habits, how well you've planned. And I think instead of just focusing in on a certain word or a certain term or, hey, this is what they're talking about today, well, there's a whole lot more things that come into it other than that. But, you know, most people spend the most money when they originally retire, right? So the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years, they're probably going to travel a little bit more. They're probably going to want to do some more things to where as you age, as we all age, I guess, things will look a little bit different. And maybe, hey, I don't want to take that extra trip, or I work with a lady right now and she said that she's going to travel now, and she's late 40s, but she's going to travel now. But when she retires, she's not going to travel anymore because she's going to have everything off her bucket list by that point. So maybe that's a strategy to use too, right? So there's a lot of things that come into it, but it's really important to assess your situation and see where you're at.
I don't believe there's any kind of template or any type of instruction book ever written that's going to work for everybody, because every individual is an individual. Your goals, Chris, and my goals and Tim's goals are probably all three different. But you do need to understand that things are going to change in your life as you mature. Some of us will get older, some of us won't. You know, that's all a mindset. But you're still going to have changes in your spending habits, because guess what? When you're 60 years old, you're full of vinegar and you're ready to take on the world. But when you get to be 75 or 80 years old, you may not. So you may not travel, like Tim says, everywhere. You may just still want to play golf like Tim does, or like you, Chris. You just never know. And I would say this, spending habits are going to change, because guess what? Just like now, I don't have any kids at home. I don't have anybody going to college. Tim's got all those situations that he's going to spend a little differently than I do, and probably a little bit differently than you, Chris. Guess what? It's the same way in retirement, because not everybody's going to do the same thing. We have clients that say, I don't want to do anything but sit at home with my grandkids. Hey, that's fine. If that's what your goals are, and if that's what you want to do, go for it. But if you've got somebody like a client that came in, he had $2.5 million and said he wanted to spend $20,000 a month in vacations during his retirement years. And I kind of look at him and I'm like, well, you've got a lot of money, but the way you're spending, just think about it this way. That's almost $250,000 a year just in vacations. That doesn't include all of the other extra expenses that you're going to have if you have a mortgage, if you have this. So how long is that principal going to last you? And he just kind of looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, $250,000 a year and you got $2.5 million. That's a little bit over 10 years. Mm-hmm. So just to kind of get you in perspective, and people like, well, then think about it that way. Well, that's how you have to think about it. And not everybody is going to have a perfectly planned out retirement. And what I mean by that is there's things in life that changes, particularly as we grow older. It's going to be health. I mean, right now, you may not take any type of prescriptions, and then 5 years from now, or maybe a year from now, things change and your expenses are $1,000 a month just in prescriptions, even though you've got the best plans in the world. Or let's say that there is something that goes on in the economy and everything, some of your kids might lose a job, and guess what? They may have to come home and live with you because they're losing their house. Those are things that have happened in my lifetime that I've seen over the last, 45, 50 years in this business. So you just plan the best way that you can, but expect things to change.
With as much experience as you guys have, the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, you've seen a wide variety of different retirements and in different scenarios that have arisen. And everyone's retirement obviously is going to be very different. As you mentioned, people may want to travel more. My parents just came back from an international trip. They're planning on going back out to Greece later on this fall. That's not going to be an annual thing for them. They just know they've saved money for this one. But there are people, Ralph, like you mentioned, who, they want to travel every single month. More power to them. And then Tim, mentioned people that maybe just want to sit at home with their grandkids, which is great, except for the fact that the grandkids may not want to sit at home all day either. And then whatever they want to do is more than likely going to cost money. You need to have a plan to factor all these things in. And with so many unknown variables, it may seem a little daunting and intimidating, but you just need to know that, you have reliable income coming in. You've taken into account those quote unquote unforeseen circumstances that we all do encounter. Inflation has always been a factor aside from, the past couple of years, that's certainly been magnified, but things cost more than they did 5 years ago, 2 years ago. Healthcare, medical costs always going to arise. Perhaps you'll remain in good health for the bulk of your retirement, and we do hope that. But if not, you want to take those into account as well. And that is where having a comprehensive plan like that retirement roadmap really comes into play. And that begins with taking the first step, reaching out, setting up a time to speak with Ralph and Tim. Bring your concerns to the table, bring your desires and your dreams to the table, and let them craft a plan around addressing those and, mitigating those concerns and doing their best to make those dreams into a reality. 804-635-3550 is how you get started. Complimentary conversation. That first step, not going to cost you anything but your time. Could be some invaluable time towards your retirement. 804-635-3550. You can go to the website as well, welcomehomefp.com. As we know, as we're all aware, things are going to cost money, both in the working world and in retirement. And in retirement, the paychecks stop. So how do you pay yourself in retirement? Christine Benz from Morningstar likes a combination of two types of guaranteed income, utilizing an annuity and Social Security.
The annuity might go hand in hand with someone employing a flexible withdrawal strategy. So if you have your sort of basic living expenses locked down with a combination of Social Security and possibly an annuity, that can give you more comfort. It can just make it easier to perhaps tighten your belt after a year like 2022 when stocks and bonds both fell simultaneously. So I actually think those two things work really nicely together, where you've got more stable lifetime income.
Is this a strategy you guys utilize with clients?
Yeah, this is one of those things that honestly a lot of people don't want to talk about. Everybody hears the annuity word and they go run in the other direction because they're told never to get into it, right? There are going to be some people still that have pensions, right? Social Security's there right now. Of course, it's always left up to whatever changes may come down the pipe, but right now we know where it is. So yeah. When you retire, we're going to need some money. No matter what your lifestyle is going to look like, no matter what you're going to need, if you're not one of those folks who can get a pension, then how do we guarantee income coming to you? An annuity could be one of those ways. But annuity is one of those things, I call it like a Swiss Army knife, because it can do different things, right? What you want to make sure of is that you don't stick everything into one pot, because then you lose all your flexibility. So I think this could potentially be a really good place for folks to pay themselves in retirement, because now they don't have that paycheck. And there's a few different things that you can take a look at. If you're looking for just protection from the market, that's one strategy that you can use with an annuity. If you want to make sure that you've got guaranteed income for you and potentially your spouse, that's one way to do it as well. So I don't think I've ever run into anybody that says they don't want guaranteed income, right? So I think it's really important for people to not necessarily listen to people talking to the masses, but hey, my individual situation, if I can assure that I'm going to have another $2,000 or $3,000 a month coming in that I know is going to fund my lifestyle and then some with part of my portfolio, why not? Right. So that's one of those things that we could potentially talk about, but it just depends on everybody's different situation, right? Because everybody's going to be a little bit different. We need to make sure that that strategy fits for them.
And I would say for most people, they have no clue of what it's going to cost them in retirement. And I think that's where we start first, is just making sure they understand what they might need, what they may not need. And also to understand that if you do have a pension, that's going to play an important part of how much money you need in retirement. And if you've done a good job in saving money for retirement through either a 401k or 403b, whatever your employer retirement plan is, you may not need any extra income between pension and Social Security, but guess what, people? You're going to be required to take a certain amount out. That's why we always start with that roadmap process of allowing people to see what they might need. And then we start talking about how do you get what you need or what you may not need. So they need to understand all aspects of their retirement income plan. And most people need to understand that the statement that you receive from your quarterly statement from maybe your retirement account is not a plan. It's not an income plan. It's just showing you how much money you may have that day. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be that way tomorrow or a year from today. Maybe more, it may be less, just depends on the market. But you need to understand where your income's coming in from. And yes, annuity may play an important part. It may not, because some people don't like them. So even though you explained the advantages and you explain the things that you may not like about them, but they do play an important part in making sure you've got that paycheck coming into you. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody that's walked in their office that says, I don't need income anymore, whether it's today or 10 years from now, because guess what? You just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and bringing up the retirement roadmap that we do, it's nice because it helps them visualize, what they're going to need. And I think that's important because a lot of people, how many times have we run into people that have never even taken a look at a budget? Right?
99% of the time.
It's pretty bad because, if you're going to retire and you no longer have an employer who's willing to pay you because you're not working there anymore, if you don't have a pension, right? There's a lot that can go wrong really quick. And if you don't know what you're going to need, how do you know what you're going to have to save up? How much income are you going to need on a monthly basis? Is it taxable? Is it not taxable? There's a lot of things that come into it. And the first part of that is you have to set yourself a really good budget. And if you don't know what your numbers are going to look like, then how do we know, what retirement's going to look like? Because we don't know where we're going to pull money from, if we can pull money. There's so many different things out there to really take into consideration.
And I think a lot of people, when we go through the roadmap and we show them based on their numbers and their numbers only, that they may have $1,000, $1,500, maybe $2,000 a month extra that they should have at the end of the month. And they look at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, based on your numbers, this is your income, this is your expenses. So you've got $2,000 a month extra. What are you doing with that? Well, I don't have that. I'm like, well, you need to go back and revisit your numbers and let's take a look, because the information that we're giving you is only as good as the information we got from you. So with that in mind, it just shocks me sometimes that people really don't understand what it costs for them to live and how much money is kind of slipping through their fingers because maybe somebody asked them for an extra latte at Starbucks or whatever. And those things aren't cheap anymore, are they, Chris?
No, not at all.
Okay. That dime coffee that used to be in the 50s is now $5 a coffee cup. So those things change. So you just really do need to understand your numbers. And that's what the roadmap does. Allows people to visualize their retirement, how much they might need and how much extra they have to do something with. And why not enjoy your retirement and understand what it takes to have that retirement you've always dreamed of? Because if you have an extra $1,000 a month, go out and enjoy it. Go take your grandkids, do something special for them, because it's all about life experience. It's not about how much money you leave to them. It's about let them enjoy life and let you enjoy them, whether it's your kids, grandkids, or special friends. That's what life is all about.
At the end of the day, money is an important factor in so much of what we do because things do cost money. But what is more important at the end of the day, making the money or making memories? I don't know anyone who's ever been on their deathbed or talking about, their grandmother or their grandfather looking back and going, oh, he just had a really, really robust portfolio at the end of the day. I don't think that's what people remember. It is about those memories that you make with those that you love and hold so dear. Things do cost money, though, and that is important. And if, at a minimum, your monthly expenditures are covered by guaranteed income, Social Security, a pension, what other assets that you have, making sure that money is coming in regardless. I know that I rely on the fact that I get paid on the 15th of every month, and at the last day of the month, that money is coming in, whether it is, every 2 weeks for other people out there. When you stop working, that guaranteed income no longer comes in from your employer. Tim, as you mentioned, as much as I wish that my employer would continue to pay me after I no longer work, pensions have gone by the wayside for the most part. That's not going to be a factor. So if you utilize other strategies, perhaps like an annuity, and you touched on something, it can kind of be a Swiss Army knife. It can do, X, Y, and Z, all sorts of different things. My son, currently in the Scouts, doesn't have his totem chip yet as far as being able to carry the Swiss Army knife, but we've talked about it and utilized it in camping. And, it's got a bunch of different things on there. It's got the knife, it's got the saw, it's got the it's got little tweezers you can pull out. It does all the things okay, but it doesn't do any of them particularly well. So when you say the Swiss Army knife approach, are there times where, obviously, market protection is a great thing to have there, but are there other times where people maybe sell annuities where they say they can do all these things, but really utilizing a different strategy might be more beneficial to them?
Well, I think some of them can be complicated, and I think that's where a lot of people, shy away because of the complication of them.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on what you're trying to do. There are certain ones out there that will do things very well, and there are certain ones out there that'll do multiple things that maybe, hey, that just isn't the right fit for you. What I think the most important thing is do your research on who you're working with, and if that person can only sell you an annuity or insurance policy, then maybe they're not the fiduciary, and maybe that's something that you need to really pay attention to because once again, not all your money needs to go into one spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to make sure that your money's doing different things for different reasons. And because if you've got all your money in the market, right, let's just say that you're in XYZ mutual fund and the next thing you know, that fund goes down. Well, guess what? All your money goes down, right? If it goes up, it goes up. We love it when it goes up, but we hate it when it goes down. So you got to make sure that there's a difference between retirement planning and investment management. And I think that's where everybody's focusing in on that big dollar amount, which is nice. I mean, we all want, big dollars, right,
Sure.
Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's, but once you're getting close to retirement or in retirement, it's not about that big number anymore. Now it's more about, hey, we need to fund our lifestyle. How do we do this? This isn't the same thing of just collecting a paycheck and then saving and investing and this, that, and the other. There's a lot more that comes into it. And just because you might potentially have a large number in that account, once again, that's still not a retirement plan. You got to really pay attention to how that's going to work for you. And there's a lot of things, annuitization, like you'll see that quite a bit when it comes to TSPs and, the government's trying to annuitize that big pot of money. Well, then at that point in time, you lose flexibility. So there's a lot that comes into it. And, it's just like anything else. I always relate an annuity to a vehicle, right? So if you were going to drive from Richmond to Miami as fast as possible and you weren't worried about getting a speeding ticket, you're going to go out and get a fast car, right?
Right.
Corvette, Maserati, whatever, Ferrari. But if you're going to go down the street to Home Depot and pick up some mulch, you're still going to have the same car.
No,
No,
not going to be able to fit much mulch in the back of a Ferrari.
Yeah. Plus, you don't want to get it too dirty either.
This is that to you.
Yeah, but they both have engines, transmissions, gas pedal, brake. So the ultimate chassis of it could potentially be similar, but the need and the use for it's going to be a little bit different.
And I think the biggest thing that people need to understand is whoever you work with, they need to understand what you're trying to do, mm-hmm. so they can make recommendations on, because you're coming to somebody that you're going to give your life savings to, and you want to make sure that, number one, you understand them, but more importantly, they understand you and what you're trying to accomplish. It may suit for some of your money to go into an annuity because this is what it does for you. But if they don't understand them, if they don't sell them, then it's kind of hard for them to make that recommendation to you. And if they're only invested in an investment brokerage guy, then what is he going to do for you? He's going to put your money into the market because that's where he's making his money. So you need to understand what it is that's best for you. He needs to understand what you're trying to accomplish, because without that, how can he make a recommendation on a fiduciary standpoint if he doesn't understand you and what you're trying to do? And every person that comes into this office has different aspirations. They have different needs. They have different wants. And that's where we kind of tailor our program and investment philosophy just based on what you're trying to do. We have people that are 80 years old that they don't want to do anything but put their money in the stock market. That's what they want to do. We make recommendations maybe to lower that risk a little bit, mm-hmm. but if they choose not to, ultimately it's your money. It's your decision to make. We can give you different options for you and explain the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's left up to you and how you want to make those decisions. And that's what is the difference between doing what's right for the client by giving them options and explaining the good, the bad, and the ugly for everything. Because not every investment is made for every one person. Would you agree, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. And you want to be wary of those who all they have access to are things like fiduciaries, because again, it is that Swiss Army knife approach where you're trying to use it to take care of everything. That's not the case. There's a time and place for utilizing an annuity, whether it is principal protection, whether it is guaranteed income. It's not going to be right for everybody out there. But speaking with a team that are fiduciaries acting in the client's best interest, what a novel concept. I say that tongue in cheek, but honestly, there are people out there who don't. They're acting in their own interest, and we could spend a whole show talking about that. But rest assured, the team, Ralph and Tim Short, they are fiduciaries. They do act in the client's best interest, which means sometimes saying things you may not necessarily want to hear, but you should hear them. But at the end of the day, the decision is up to you. If they believe that, using an annuity or some other source for guaranteed income or principal protection is going to benefit you in the long run, they will present that and they will explain it to you. But at the end of the day, it is your choice to make because it is your retirement. And they want to make sure that it is, in fact, that you get to enjoy it the way that you want to. But you have to take the first step, reach out and set up a time to speak with them at any of their 3 offices. Again, welcomehomefp.com is the website. Find out more there, set up a time to speak with them there. You can also give a call, 804-635-3550. Start that planning process, that retirement roadmap process, 804-635-3550. 804-635-3550. As a reminder, previous editions of Aspire to Retire available via podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you consume your podcast media. Just search for Aspire to Retire. It's all there for you to check out at your leisure, right there on the comfort of your phone if you want to. Unless you don't have a smartphone, which is becoming more and more prevalent. The so-called dumb phone is making a resurgence. People are ditching their smartphones for simpler, old-school models like flip phones to reduce screen time and improve their mental health. I kind of long for the days of my Motorola Razr, but let's compare that to simplicity when it comes to financial planning. When somebody comes in for an analysis, how often do you guys find yourselves streamlining what they have to make their retirement both easier to understand and then just easier in general?
Well, I think it happens quite a bit. I mean, we see it where, there's not I shouldn't say there's not a whole lot of people out there, but There's a lot of folks now that don't work for just one company,
Mhm.
right? For their entire career. They're going to work in multiple locations, meaning that they probably have still their old 401k or TSP or whatever still out there. And, if you're a job hopper and, now we've massed up 7 different retirement funds or retirement accounts. What is the point of leaving those where they sit, right? Obviously, you can't streamline everything. You've got to make sure that, if it's an IRA or a 401k, if it's pre-tax money, we can put that into an IRA and we can streamline it that way. But you can't take after-tax money. So we couldn't take a savings account and attach that or combine that with a 401k more than likely. So there's a lot to it. But I think it is important when you're in retirement is keeping things simple, because the last thing you want to do is confuse yourself or
Mhm.
make a wrong decision that ultimately could have some repercussions of maybe some more taxation or penalties or what have you. But I think that's what we normally see when it comes to, hey, should we streamline this or streamline that? If you've got several different accounts, what's the purpose of those accounts? Is it just, hey, I haven't done anything with them, or I don't know how they work, or whatever? I mean, what's the sense in that? So I think it's life is a lot better when it's a little bit more simpler. And I think especially in retirement when, let's be honest, in retirement at some point in time, our mind might not be as sharp as it is today. And if you've got things still out there that are confusing and you don't have any advisor, you don't work with a team, and, hey, maybe we forgot about a 401k because it's been so long, and now you had $100,000 sitting in an account that you were never aware of. And now your beneficiaries are hunting it down and trying to figure out this, that, and the other. And, I hate to say it this way too, but sometimes if that was the oldest 401k, might not have a beneficiary on that account, then that's going to turn into some more issues. So I think it is really important to make life a little bit more simpler. I don't know if I want to go back to the days of the Motorola Razor, but we do have a fair amount of clients that do have the old flip phones again. And I think it is important, a lot of people, not just, pre-retirees or retirees, but even the younger generation is, reduce some of that screen time and not be on the phone quite as much would be nice. And I think if we had to text with the old Motorola Razor, and if we wanted to get to see, we had to hit the number 2 button 3 times to get there. I think things would be a little. I would say that we'd probably be on our phones a little bit less.
And there are people that a lady that I know that is one of our clients that retired this year. She's got like 8 or 10 different checking accounts, one to pay this bill, one to do this, one to have deposits there. And I'm like, look at her, I'm like, how do you keep track of all this stuff? She said, well, that's my job now. I said, well, that's not a job that I would want in retirement, is keeping track of all your finances because you got them spread all over the world. But the other thing too is people will come in and they say, yeah, I remember that I worked for this company and I got a 401k over there, but I'm not sure where it is. I hadn't seen any statements here lately, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, let's see what we can find out. And all of a sudden, it takes us 3 months to find them. And once we find them, we find out that the last dollar was taken because of all the fees over the years. I mean, this one nurse was there, and the hospital had been sold 3 times since she stopped work there. And the fees ate up. I mean, it wasn't that much, but $10,000-$15,000 when she left is now zero. That still meant that you've lost, a pretty good chunk of change over the years. So why would you want to do that? Let's keep life as simple as we can, because you might enjoy it a little bit better instead of trying to figure out what did I do here and what did I do there. So there are a lot of people that's got way too many different types of insurance policies that you may not need or may not have a use for anymore. So those are all things that we sit down and talk to people about. And really, when it comes to your 401ks, if you got more than one, or if your 403bs, whatever it is, guess what? It probably has the same type of investments in them all, because a lot of them has the same type of stock. So you may have 8 or 10 different 401ks with different money managers, but they might have the same thing. So you may have 50% of your portfolio just in one stock, and you didn't even know it because you've got 8 or 10 different mutual funds. So those are all things that you need to be cognizant of when you start taking a look at simplifying your life in retirement. I don't know of anybody that wants to complicate their life when they're thinking about slowing down and enjoying life instead of, worrying about 12 or 15 different checking accounts. Would you agree with that, Chris?
Oh, absolutely. And the lady you mentioned, we talk so often here on the show about working in retirement because you want to, not because you have to. And typically that means going back into the actual workforce. But, this lady, and I'm not trying to beat up on her by any means, but, trying to manage all these different accounts, that is a job in and of itself, as she said, and it's not necessarily something that she has to do. The simplification, as you mentioned, 401ks, if you've got multiple and they're all invested in the same way, if the market's doing great and that stock is doing great, fantastic. But if it's not doing well, that's the opposite of fantastic. And if you don't have eyes on it, you're not going to know that, out of sight, out of mind, out of money. It's kind of something that you don't want to have, but it does happen. I had a call from a friend of mine at the end of last year, my buddy Casey that I used to work with about 10 years ago. And he said, hey, we caught up for a little bit, and then he got to the heart of what he wanted to do. He goes, hey, do you know who the HR person is at the company that we used to work at? Because I think I've got a 401k there. And I went, Casey, it's been a decade. The HR person, the company name has changed twice. The HR person has changed, I think, 3 times. Last I heard, this was the person, I was helping him track down. And quite frankly, I don't know what Casey made back then, but he didn't have a lot of money in there. So I was reluctant to say that there probably isn't any money in there anymore. But, bringing it all under one roof, simplifying everything to take some of that confusion out so that you aren't forgetting about things, or if they are underperforming, you are more aware. That is the power of, coming in and speaking with a team like Welcome Home Financial Partners, is that simplification to say, okay, where are your assets at, and how do we bring it all together under one umbrella to bring a little more clarity, a little bit more simplification. If you aren't sure, if you're hearing right now, you go, oh, I do have a 401k at X, Y, or Z, or, I don't know how I'm going to take into account tax, and honestly, any aspect of your retirement, and you want to simplify things. I think we all kind of yearn for that. Pick up the phone, whether it is your smartphone or your flip phone, or, the old Nokia bricks that people had that are indestructible. Give a call, 804-635-3550, 804-635-3550, or go to the website. If you got the dumb phones, you probably have to use your computer for this, but the website is welcomehomefp.com. Begin that retirement roadmap process. Bring a little bit more simplicity and clarity to your overall retirement picture. It is estimated that there is $12 trillion in 401ks and other retirement funds. Some people having multiple, as we just discussed. And a lot of people want a piece of it. We've done stories before about new offerings that are popping up, like cryptocurrency and annuities, of course. But now private equity firms want a piece, they want a place in your 401k. Guys, what is private equity? Does it come with more risk? And is it something a person in their 50s and 60s should take a look at?
Well, what I would say to anybody when it concerns private equity, it's just basically a hedge fund that does their own thing. There's equities in it, there's some bonds in it, but there's also assets like Bitcoin. There could be real estate. There could be, what they do is they buy companies, and their job is to make sure that company makes money. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's not as regulated as the 401k market that you know of right now. And that's the thing that a lot of people need to be aware of. Now, yes, you can make a lot more money with the hedge funds because they do a little bit more in risk, not aversion, but they do things that a little bit more risk. It's the old axiom that says the more risk, the better the return. That could be so, but guess what? It could be the other way around. So you kind of have to be a little bit careful on that. And yes, they're looking for new frontiers to gather assets so they can have assets to, because their main goal is to buy companies. And with that, you need capital to do that. So that is what they're looking for, is capital markets. And I think the biggest issue for most people is the capital markets they've been going to, endowment funds, things of that nature, is kind of drying up because they don't have as much money out there to go to. So that's why they're looking at the 401k market, because guess what? There's a lot of money out there. And I think the biggest issue for most people is your money is a lot more locked up than it is with your traditional 401k as far as the investment itself. You're still going to have to deal with the rules and regulations of the 401k, but also they're going to tie your money up usually between 5 and 10 years that you can't get access to it to come back out unless they have sold it or whatever. So those are some issues that a lot of people need to understand. And, you know, until they get that business sold or flipped or whatever you want to call it, you won't have access to a lot of that money. And guess what, people? They do make money themselves because they're going to charge you a management fee.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do well, and it's usually around 2%, and that's usually the typical 2% management fee on a yearly basis. But at the same time, if they make money for you and they sell that asset at the end of the 5 or 10 years, whatever it is, guess what? They're going to take 20% of that profit. So just be aware of that. That gets to be pretty expensive for most people. So if they made $100,000 profit, they're going to take $20,000 off the top before they distribute any of that money out to you or anybody else. So be aware of that. It's nothing wrong with it. That's called capitalism.
Right.
But you need to understand it's not quite the same as buying in a mutual fund or a target dated fund. And it's a little bit more risky. So should you have all your money in it? I don't think so, but should you have some? Probably. Okay. If they ever are allowed to get into the 401k. And particularly if you're in 20, 30s and 40-year-olds, guess what? You really don't have access to your money anyway,
right,
in a 401k without penalties, things like that. So it's not as big a deal. But when you get in your 50s and 60s, then you need to really understand the nuances, differences between a target dated fund, a mutual fund, an ETF. Okay, so all those are things that you need to be aware of when you start thinking about nearing retirement, because guess what? Your time has been strictly limited at that point in time, because you're going to start needing that money in 5 to 10 years, maybe even 15 years. So be aware that the risk is there and you need to have somebody understand what you're trying to do. And as a fiduciary, make sure you understand, if you decide to do this, how's that going to affect you and your goals and aspirations? Would you agree, Tim?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, how much risk you want to have. But, time's going to have a lot to do with that. So once again, regardless of what fund or what investment or whatever inside that account, you've got to make sure that it's fitting for yourself. And, if you're 20 years old, it's not going to be the same thing as it is when you're 60 years old or 40 years old. I mean, things are going to change. I mean, growing up, we were always told there's 2 things guaranteed in life, and that's paying taxes and dying. Well, to me, there's we need to introduce number 3, and that means that every day is going to be different, right? There's going to be change.
right.
So I think that's what most people need to take into consideration is, we talked about it earlier about, hey, I got these 5 different accounts, but they're all in the same holdings. So what are you doing, right? So I think, it's important to assess where you're at, assess your risk tolerance, and then figure it out from there. And that's something that we can help out with, because most people just take a look at, past performance on different investments. Well, that's not indicative of the future. So that's not the end all be all. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. It's like, well, since inception, this was doing 10% versus this one's doing 5%. Well, that's all fine and good, but that doesn't mean that this year is going to bring the same thing. So there's a lot that comes into it. And whether it's a private equity firm or a hedge fund or, a stock, bond, ETF, whatever, everything's going to work a little bit different. So it's really important to figure out, what you're going to need once you get to retirement and how far, down the road is retirement. Because once again, I know we beat up on the 20-year-olds all the time, but, if you're 20 years old, it's completely different than when you're 60. So there's a lot to do with that. And I think, usually when people work with a team or work with advisors, they generally get a little bit better advice, and they kind of get their hands held a little bit to where it's like, okay, hey, now instead of keeping the same strategy through decades and decades, maybe we need to figure out something a little bit different, because we never know what the future holds, and we need to make sure that we've got that money there but we've got to build that money first too. So there's a lot to do with that.
And I would say to most people, you don't need to understand every nuance within every investment that you have, but you need to have somebody to explain what they are and how they work in a simplistic term, so you have at least a general concept of all this. And how many people come into our office, Tim, and say, I have no idea what I've got. I just know that they told me that I have a 401k and it's with this company. And they told me that, hey, go ahead and pick whatever you want out. And they have no idea.
Oh, yeah. It happens quite a bit.
Yeah. And even when they bring in their statement, they'll say, can you explain this to me? Because I have no idea how to read it. And I don't understand any of this. And that's kind of one of the things that we do for people. Say, all right, this is what you got. This is how it works. And, I said, well, you got a target dated fund. Well, what's that? Well, target dated fund just basically means that based on your age, that's kind of what they allocate between bonds and stocks for most of it. And the closer you get to retirement, the less stocks you're going to have. But that may fit for you. It may not. But you need to understand how that operates, at least conceptually. And then if that works for you or you're fine with it, great. But if you don't understand any of it, then it's not the role of the HR people. I've always complained and said that I do believe that most companies don't do a very good job of explaining to the employees why it's important to contribute to 401k, how they operate. And I understand why. It's because we have too many lawyers in the world that, they're always looking for somebody to go after, and they don't want, the employer, they don't want to have any legal issues. So they just say, hey, we have a plan. This is what it is, and you get to pick and choose what you want to participate in. That leaves them out of the responsibility stage, in my opinion. So, right?
Yeah. And I also, we talk about different types of investments. We see it a lot, especially here in this area of company stock, right? And a lot of people shove so much money into their company stock inside their 401k. Well, you're putting a lot of dollars out there that are just riding on one company. And if that company doesn't do well or what have you, a lot of your money's not going to do well.
Right.
So I think, we've seen it between different companies as of late, hey, let's go ahead and start spreading this out a little bit more, not having, $500,000. We got a client now that had $800,000 in his company stock. And he brought it in and said, is this the right strategy? And it's like, well, I mean, your company's a good company. I'm not going to name the company, but he goes, what would you recommend? And of course, we go through the roadmap process and talked about diversifying a little bit more, because you don't want to have your largest pot of money just into one thing. So that's a lot to do with it, because especially here in Richmond, depending on who you're working for, there's a lot of people now that have a lot of company stock. Sometimes that's all they have. So are you going to put all of your money riding on one particular company? I don't know if that's the best strategy for most folks.
I have one word for you, Chris, since I'm probably senior here between all three of us.
Probably.
One word, Enron.
Oh, yeah.
So when people start thinking about having all your money in one stock, understand that is something that could happen, because it has happened in the past. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but just be aware things like that can happen. And how many people lost their entire retirement accounts back then, and they are not getting everything they should be getting just because they felt like their company was the best thing since sliced bread and they were going to take care of them. Just be aware, you are responsible for you, and always remember that. And you need to have the information for you to make the correct decisions for yourself. You cannot rely on your HR person to make your life easier down the road. It's up to you. You need to find somebody that can help you, and your company is there to make money for the company. Okay. And if they do, and you own a lot of stock, that's great, but they're more concerned about making money for the company than making money for you. Always remember that.
As pensions have gone by the wayside, the 401ks, companies have kind of put the onus of saving for retirement on the employee in and of themselves. And at the risk that she might be listening, I'm not going to speak one way or another about my HR department and my HR person at work. But you guys mentioned risk tolerance and the purpose of your dollars out there. And yes, the risk tolerance and the investment strategy of a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old are going to, should at least vary pretty drastically. But when it comes to a retiree, again, in being 60, the risk tolerance isn't all one thing for, as we said, putting all your eggs in one basket. It shouldn't all be the same, right? There is still money out there that you're not going to be touching for 15, 20 years. And so maybe not thinking like a 20-year-old, but as far as that goes, thinking like a 40 or 50-year-old, is that also diversification?
I wouldn't think that it's as what I would call diversification, but I would say that you do need to take a look at where you are and how soon it is that you're going to retire. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then at that point in time, decide how much risk you want to take and go from there. It's just, there's no template for every one person. That's the thing that I would say to anybody. And it's always going to be based on your decisions as how well you do. Some people do a better job than others because they've taken the time to inform themselves, or they've hired an advisor that's done a good job for them because they understood what they were trying to do, and they are fiduciaries, and they've done a good job for people. So there's nothing wrong with having an advisor to help you along the way. Because let me just say this to you: if in this day and age, when back in the 70s, when you could have spark plugs in a car that you could change and tune up yourself, to today, things have changed a lot in tuning up your car. You need almost a PhD in electronics to be a mechanic anymore, where it was before, it wasn't. So my thinking to you is this: go to an advisor that can help you guide you through all the obstacles, all the ups and downs of life. Because guess what? There are going to be times when you need some help, and there's nothing wrong with that. When I need some help at a doctor, I don't go to see my mechanic, okay? And most people can appreciate that, I believe.
Yeah, hopefully they won't jumpstart you if you go there. But I think diversification is one of those terms that are kind of overused too. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think diversification is, okay, hey, I'm going to go out and buy 1,000 different shares of different company stock. No, yes, that is diversification, but on the same side is you don't want to be too diversified, because then if the market's doing well, you might not keep up with it, and vice versa. So I think it's more important to, instead of you trying to do it all on your own, is to reach out to somebody who can help you, who's lived through the experiences, who's seen it. Because there's always opportunity out there. And if you don't seek the opportunity, you're never going to know that it's there, right? So that's why I think it's important. As you're aging, as we're getting closer, you really need to start reassessing things once you hit your 40s. Because the last 20 years, hopefully, you were building up some wealth. Hopefully you picked some right funds. But once you get to 40, things are going to change. There's some people who want to retire in their 50s. There's some people who never want to retire, but it's all dependent on what you need and what you want. And everybody's desires are going to be a little bit different. So the strategy, if you want to retire at 50, is a lot different than somebody who wants to retire at 70. So it's important to figure that out and go into those experts to do that.
You want to make sure your plan is custom suited for you and whatever it is you want to achieve in retirement. As you mentioned, retiring at 50 is going to look a lot different than retiring at 70. You want to prepare for that. Making sure you are ready to retire at that point, and then also that you're going to be able to take care of the years ahead in retirement. I think most people realize if you're retiring at 50, you're going to be spending more time in retirement, which is not a bad thing as long as you've got the means to do it. And so you want that plan that is customized specifically for you. Just by listening to the show, you're showing that you are taking your retirement planning seriously. So great job on that. The next step, of course, is now having that plan put together for you, that customized retirement roadmap. And that is what the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners can do, help create and from the beginning up until, to, through, and beyond retirement. but you have to take the next step and reach out and set up a time to speak with them. Schedule that time. Begin that retirement roadmap process. 804-635-3550 is the phone number. That's 804-635-3550. You can go online to the website as well. Find out more about the entire team. The First Friday events, they invite you to attend those, in a more informal setting. If you're not ready to just, come into the office right away and begin that process, you can find out more about those as well on the website, welcomehomefp.com. But we do encourage you, as you get closer and closer to retirement, it is important to be well informed. And again, just by listening, you're showing that you're taking that first step. So as always, we appreciate you joining us, spending part of the day here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Hope you stay safe out there. Gentlemen, appreciate the time as always. And as we wrap up, I do want to leave you with the final word.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And we appreciate your time as well. But, we've talked a lot about uncertainty and, a whole lot of change going on, estate planning, Roth conversions. These things are very important and can be very important for your retirement plan. So, if anything you heard today kind of struck a nerve, if you will, give us a call. We'd love to see what kind of value we can provide for you. We bring it into the office and we can create your very own retirement roadmap. But pick up the phone, give us a call, visit the website, attend one of the First Friday events. We'd love the opportunity to meet with you. So we want to thank everybody for listening and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.